like to welcome everybody here to the MIFF Talking Pictures. My name's Alice Glenn, and I'm the director of an organisation called No Lights No Lycra. I'm the mediator for today. I feel very honoured to be sitting here with these four very talented people, and very excited that there's so many great dance films in this year's MIFF program. Hopefully you'll all go out and check them out at some stage. One of the reasons I love dance is because it means I don't have to talk very much. So I'll be leaving most of the talking to these four people. Let's just start by maybe if you guys could introduce yourselves and let us know what your experience of dance film is, or dance. Yeah, just give us a brief history of... Should I start, Ella?
Sure. So my name's Ella Havelka, and I am currently a dancer with the Australian Ballet. Is that better? And yeah, this year in MIFF there's a movie called Ella, and it's about myself and my experiences going from living in a country town in Dubbo, New South Wales, and joining the Australian Ballet School here in Melbourne, before joining Bangarra Dance Theatre, and then finally making the transition back to ballet. And I'm about 27 years old now. Is that about all that you wanted to know from me? Anything else in particular?
Sounds good.
Yeah?
Hi, my name's Celia Rowlson-Hall. It's very intimidating being next to a ballet dancer. I have to stand up a little higher. So I'm from New York, and my background is in dance and choreography, but in the past 5 years I've really focused in bringing my background of dance into film. And so I'm here with a film that I wrote and directed and choreographed called Ma, and it is the story of a virgin mother on a pilgrimage to Las Vegas to give birth to our Savior. And it is entirely dialogue-free, as it is my intention to have movement be the vehicle and the story, instead of something secondary to the story. So that's something that I'm really passionate about, bringing dance to film.
Hi, my name's Gideon Obarzanek. I'm a choreographer. I was a dancer. I began, actually my first dance piece that I ever made was actually a film work. It was terrible. It was a very long time ago, and then I got kind of much better at it. I founded Chunky Move, a dance company based here in Melbourne, I think in '95, and I left a number of years ago. I am now involved also in programming with Melbourne Festival and with the Asian Pacific Triennial of Performing Arts, which begins next year. And I'm still very much involved in making shows, both kind of theatre performance pieces as well as dance.
Hi, my name is Anouk van Dijk. I'm currently the artistic director of Chunky Move. I'm originally from the Netherlands, where I started as a dancer and then became a choreographer and artistic director, teacher, deviser of all kinds of stuff. I created my first dance film and my only dance film about 14, 15 years ago, and that was on film, on celluloid, very hard to make, and afterwards I decided never to do it again. Then only recently my last work I made for Chunky Move, called Lucid, had live cameras and was live editing on film, where it was from a dance perspective. We worked with live cameras and film in the show, but there's not much movement on the screens. Actually, it's predominantly faces. I've been editing all my own films because when you make a dance work, it's ephemeral, it disappears. So I always find it very important to have a very good registration of the work that we have. So I direct the cameras that we have and are quite involved in the editing as well, so we get the vision of how I perceive the performance edited on film. So,
Thank you. Ella, I thought we'd start the ball rolling with you. Your film, Ella, is premiering at MIFF. Have you seen the film to start with?
Yes, I've seen a very rough copy.
Great. And what's it like being the subject of a documentary all about you?
Well, obviously, as a dancer, I'm naturally very self-critical of myself. So any time that I was sort of being a normal human, I could kind of handle. But then any time I'm on stage or I'm dancing, I have to look away slightly because it's very hard to watch a lot of yourself doing the very thing that you love doing and not critique yourself. So when I decided to go ahead and make this documentary or be the subject of this documentary, I mainly did it with the mindset of this was very much for my mother and for my family to have something, permanent that they can and then show off to their family and friends. And yeah, so it was very much a journey I did so that they could have on record how much they helped me through, all my transitions. So I try and not be too critical when I watch it, but obviously it's quite a challenge.
You were just saying earlier that it was a very lengthy process. Can you tell us how long did it take to shoot Ella?
Well, originally we were supposed to film over 6 months, but that extended purely because each little section of the film was shot in such a small amount of time that they didn't necessarily get all the story to flow smoothly. So then they would come back to me and we'd sit down and have another interview session, which we would then bring up sections of the story that previously filmed, or they'd ask me more questions and to make the story flow, to add, edit it to make it in context, even though bits and pieces were filmed out of context. And so it did stretch out to be 12 months by the end of it, by the time the last screening or the last filming section was completed. And so I was basically filmed for that long amount of time, and once it was over, it was quite relieving.
The magic of filmmaking.
Yeah.
So quick and easy.
Yeah, it's not an easy process, that's for sure.
Can you just tell us a little bit about what the film is about?
Sure. So I guess the first time I heard that people were interested in making a film about me was when I joined the Australian Ballet back in 2013, and I became the first Indigenous Australian to join the company in its 50-year history. So I guess that is what sparked the initial interest in my story. And so then the story takes us on a journey from when I was younger and I was growing up with my single mother in Dubbo, and we didn't have, a lot of money, and I guess the story really shows how my mum was my rock and my family as well, helping me on my journey to become a dancer because it was what I was passionate about. And she moved to Melbourne with me to train full time, and I guess the story then takes us on an arc from where I go from ballet to the Bangarra Dance Theatre in Sydney, and then back to ballet again. So the story shows those transitions and my mum's input in those transitions, and also close friends and family who have all supported me and helped me through those transitions.
Mums.
Oh, mums.
In a number of the films that are on the dance film program at MIFF, the issue of gender and race equality is a strong theme. This is a question for anyone who wants to chime in. What role do you think dance or dance film has in challenging these stereotypes or directing these discussions?
Well, I guess seeing as I was just talking, I realised a few years ago with the emergence of So You Think You Can Dance in Australia, I thought that challenged the gender thing quite a bit. I know that's not film, but like, for instance, there's always been that stereotype of boys have to be gay if they want to do ballet or any type of dancing. So I guess that sort of challenged it a fair bit. And film in general is they're still challenging that, and you can see it in the media as well. A lot of cultural diversity now is embraced in the dance world because of film and TV and a lot of that.
What about you, Celia? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I still think there's sort of miles to go there, because I think that I think we still have these notions of sort of masculine and feminine strength inside of dance, and what I'm really interested in is beautiful men and strong women. And so I personally think that a lot of dance in our more popular culture, specifically if it's women dancing, it's for the male audience, for the male gaze, and so what I want is to see men and women dancing for themselves, and so that's very important for me. It's the kind of dance that I put out into the world, because I think it's a lot of dance that actually makes it to more larger platforms seems to be a bit base and cheesy. So I think that's why it's very interesting to bring in more modern dance styles and classical styles to more popular platforms, so that we don't just see a lot of booty shaking.
In one of the films, Reset, which is showing at MIFF, the director of the Paris Opera makes the comment, until dance, and I think he's referencing classical ballet, until dance moves beyond its traditional limitations, the art form risks becoming truly outdated, leaving audiences and performers behind. I was wondering, do you think classical ballet specifically still has a long way to go and needs to evolve in order to represent society in a truer form?
I think dance has really moved on. I think classical ballet represents, late 17th century, late 18th century and 19th century, particularly Romanticism, and there is new dance all the time. I don't think ballet really needs to move on. I think ballet is ballet, and ballet translates as dance, literally. So, we are moving on. I think it's a ridiculous notion that ballet somehow needs to become contemporary, because there is contemporary. It's just here, and it's being done all the time. It's not necessarily for the role of ballet to identify. It's a bizarre thing to question what is the role of. It's like saying what is the role of classical music in today's society. Well, it has a role. People really like heritage art forms, and they're really into it, and they enjoy it. If they want to, be involved in more contemporary music, they listen to more contemporary music, and they make it. And that's very much the same with dance.
What about in terms of representing a more diverse sort of community? Like in the case of Ella, the film, Ella was the first Indigenous dancer in, what year was it? It was only 4 years ago that you started at the Australian Ballet?
So it was their 50th year, or just after their 50th year that I joined, the company's 50th year.
Yeah.
Like in ballet? You're talking about ballet?
Yeah, in ballet.
General? I think it's a bit what Gideon is saying. There's sort of a classical notion about what the form of ballet is, and the form is always looking for the ideal body. And in the film Ella, I've already seen a sneak preview, you see very well how that's being challenged and not so much questioned, but also embraced, that the beauty lies within the classical form on one hand, but on the other hand it also lies in the person who decides to embody that art form. So in that sense, there's some strength in the form itself that you can't just simply break or change, but it doesn't mean that the aesthetics around it don't evolve. Look at Misty Copeland, the famous ballerina from the American dance. She's still with the American Ballet Theatre, I think. Famous, the first black principal, black American Afro-American dancer in the American Dance Theater. She's the first principal in the company, which she became a rock star in the United States, true rock star. And you'll go here to Rebel Sports and she's on the posters. She is an iconic woman, and she has the classical line in a new aesthetic form. So in that sense, yeah, the eye of the audience, I think, evolves and changes. But I think what happens with an audience that loves ballet is there's, I think, a part of the audience likes to go back into, oh, everything I've missed in my life, let me catch up on the classics. There's that desire. There's the sentiment of seeing bodies that do things that you can never dream of doing. So particularly the older body of the audience is very much in awe by that kind of celebration of human strength. So there's some kind of that classical desire of athleticism that ballet still offers. And there's a big range of repertoire now in ballet that can bring out different types of athleticism in the dances. And I think it will evolve, as Ella will probably not be the last Indigenous dancer with the Australian ballet. So
we just gained another one this year.
There you go. So it's just a matter of, a change of time, and it will change, I think. Yeah.
Celia, I read somewhere that you like working with non-dancers. Is this, did I read this correctly? Is this true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love to work with a mix of non-dancers and dancers, because I think that there's non-dancers bring a sense of physical urgency on screen that I'm really interested in, that I then like to balance with the incredible physicality that dancers bring. So I think there's something about blending the realness and the beauty and having them meet one another so that the actors want to elevate, and then the dancers almost want to sort of become a little more pedestrian, so that everything feels of the world and not it doesn't have that extra bit of heightenedness, so that you don't feel connected to it. So my goal is that movement feels absolutely relatable and doable, and then will catch you off guard that actually, oh, you can't do that kind of moment. So that's what I'm headed for.
So are the dancers in Ma, you're obviously trained and you play the lead role. The other dancers in the film, are they actors or are they trained dancers?
All actors, and then one trained dancer who I have tumbled down a 80-foot sand dune, flipping just over
it's
and
incredible
over and
footage.
over.
So
but besides that, all actors.
do you want to tell us a little bit about Ma and where the concept for the film came from?
Yeah. So as I said, it's I guess what I was very interested in is when we pick up on our heroes and the hero's journey. It's always the little boy, the baby in the bulrushes or on the back of the stoop that's found, and then you understand their journey. And so I wanted to take it one step behind and say, well, then what is the mother's journey, and can her journey be the hero's journey? So I created a hero's journey for a Mother Mary type character, but it's a very sort of a road story, a very American story with a Western almost theme. And I grew up very religious, and I wanted to be Jesus, and then I had a moment of realizing I couldn't be Jesus. I can be Mary, okay, virgin child, let's go. And so I think there's something that I just am very passionate about in my work, and that is I always want to go to to home, and so when I was thinking of wanting to express what it's like to be a woman today, I wanted to almost go back to women before. And so all of a sudden I landed on this moment of childhood of praying to be Mary. And so the story was sort of just, it's a big old barf of my whole self, most eloquently said.
And can you tell us a little bit, how long was the process of making the film? You were saying before, again, filmmaking, nice, quick, easy process.
So I wrote the story, as I said, it was a throw-up moment. I wrote the entire script over the course of 2 very early mornings, and then I looked at it and I said, okay, let's make this. And then I spent a couple years trying to raise money to no avail, and so then I did a Kickstarter, and that's how I started the first round of funding for it. And then exactly 2 years ago, basically to this day, went out to the desert and shot for almost a month, and then a really intense amount of editing and sound design, and then let's see, last September had the premiere, so now it's about a year of touring with the film.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about the technical aspects of making a dance film, in particular around the role of editing. Obviously, you can do a lot with editing that you can't do with a live dance performance, and I feel like the editor almost takes on the role of a choreographer in a way. I thought we could talk about sort of the role and responsibilities of an editor in making a dance film and editing choreography. Anyone can...
I was in on every single day of editing for my film, and I just am a true believer in as few as cuts as possible, especially for dance on film, so that you can actually feel what the dancer is doing, because with each cut you're affecting the rhythm and the pacing, and if the choreography is intact, it has its own rhythm and pacing, so it's to honor that. So I think that less is definitely more when approaching dance on film, and I also agree 100% that editing is choreography, and that each piece has its own kineticism and rhythm and timing, and it's having to really feel that from start to finish. And it wasn't until making a feature where I realized, oh my God, you've got to watch it from start to finish each time to feel just like a whole evening length piece of where do you get caught up? Where is it too fast? Where is it too slow? So that was something that I didn't really plan for and takes a lot of time.
So do you feel like the process of creating choreography is different for film than it is for live performance? Like, are you choreographing for different film shots, and it sounds like majority of your editing is sort of pretty limited or minimal, but is it a different process?
I feel like I'm hogging this. Do you
No.
Go?
Oh, well, I think rhythm and time is very different watching dance on film as it is watching it live. So in my experience, I would start obviously choreographing it live, thinking of it for camera, but ultimately only being able to see it live. But once you bring in a camera and you bring a camera person in, or unless you are the camera person yourself, then there's the whole choreography. There's another level of choreography which is between the camera and the dance itself, and that already then changes it a lot. And then the third, as you say, is editing, which is again kind of choreography. So there's a kind of a three-step process to watching dance on film as opposed to watching it live. And I think that our experience to watching screen is we process very, very quickly, and we move quite fast. So in live performance, you can develop things over a slower period of time, and in fact, they demand it demands time. I think if you spent that amount of time on screen, you're gone. It just doesn't quite work that way.
Yeah, it almost feels like 1/100th of time live versus on screen. It is because, I personally, just having the dance background from theater, I always choreograph as if I'm doing it for stage, and then from that, like that's my that's basically that's the foundation, and then I figure out exactly how I want to shoot it. But I definitely feel like I want the dance to be able to live outside of the film, just like the writing should live outside of the film, if you were to write a script. So I want it to feel as full and intact, and it can't rely on editing, on those kinds of things. So I want to make sure the foundation's strong.
I think also on film, the framing is so deciding how we perceive the actual movement or the dance, whereas on stage we have so much freedom, how much we zoom in into one person, look at two, look at three, look at the whole stage, look at the lights. We are actually distracted very quickly. So because the frame of the film is so dominant, we get it very quickly. We understand this person is tired, or we understand there is danger. We understand these things very quickly because it's all manipulated, and on stage it's slightly more ambiguous what happens there. So the stage gives, in that sense, more freedom for interpretation, and the screen is more dominant in either delaying our expectation or pushing it. It's much more of a control form.
I wonder as well, as a dancer, that repetitive nature of filmmaking, performing the same move over and over again, how does that affect the way you experience the move and the emotion that's attached to that movement? Is that lost? I mean, as you film the same shot over and over again?
I think professional dancers are really used to repetition because often that's what they're doing a lot when they're doing live performance. And I actually wonder it more about dramatic acting, as when they, you do an establisher, and then you do face and face and reversals, and how they kind of can do it every time. So I'm kind of in awe, almost the other way around. Like I kind of feel like, oh, dancing, yeah, I can do that again, and it kind of gets its own life of its own every time you do it. But I don't know how dramatically it's done.
I think when there's sort of a durational quality, like I did a dance film, a 10 minutes dance film, but it got the illusion of that it was at least a full day that happened in the 10 minutes. So we had to make these time leaps in it in terms of exhaustion or in terms of the intimacy that grew between the two dancers in the film. And we really had to force it to make it look realistic. So we had to pretend to be out of breath, whether we were not out of breath. And on film, in the end, it looked very real. But for me and the other performer, we both knew it was very fake, so we couldn't actually watch it ourselves. But everybody said, yeah, it was very realistic. We absolutely felt in minute 7 you were absolutely exhausted, whereas it was all, it was just a matter of acting. And in that sense, it's a form that's very difficult to, it will, in that sense, always stay fake. I mean, there's a film director, Katie Mitchell, a British film director who works with live film. She makes enactments of live films on stage, and it's all acted out in front of your eyes, including the foleying of the sound of everything and all the effects of wind machines, and everything is, you see the final result on the top part of the stage, and the bottom part of the stage is where they make the film, including all the edits and the cuts and the leaps in time. And I've watched a couple of her films / theater productions, and the incredible thing is the actors explained that still for them the difference was that they were in the live experience of enacting everything out and being the cameraman and then being on screen and the cameraman and on screen. And what happened with the performance, that they were still in the idea of live performance, although it was all cut and edited, but the concentration was ongoing because they made the film live. So what you saw on screen, it was so realistic how the emotions kind of evolved over the 1.5 hours of this live enacted film that she makes. And most of her work are like this, that it did kind of transcend the classic way of we pretend acting, because there was another form of having to realize that under the pressure of a live audience, that created this other layer of intensity in the work. So it's very fascinating. Katie Mitchell. Yeah.
Thanks for repeating that name.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about Lucid, the performance you put on, is that a couple of years ago?
Yeah, well, actually, it's a recent production from Chunky Move, and in Lucid there's a big screen on stage, and we work with 5 live cameras on stage. It's all live editing, and I guess the only time I worked with video was a long time ago when I made a film, and then afterwards I always felt to have video on stage with dancers there's always a conflict, because your eye is just drawn to the screens. That's just what our eye does. And then 2 years ago, I started to work a little bit on a concept where I was very interested in how we perceive ourselves through the medium of camera. Because we all have cameras, we all have selfies, we all have iPads, we all can enact little moments of capturing ourselves on screen. So by seeing ourselves on screen, it means we look at ourselves differently than, let's say, 10 years ago. Because we can control the way we look, but we also know the way we look. So my daughter is 13 years old. How she communicates through screens with her friends and enacts things out on camera and lives this other life on the flat screen is a very different way of forming identity than, let's say, when I was 13. So I got really interested in just the relationship to the screen and the cameras. So we decided to do a work where basically the screen and the camera, they were the main character, and the performers were responding to the fact that there were cameras on them all the time. So I worked with an actor and I worked with a dancer who have a very different relationship to seeing themselves on screen than the actor, particularly when you're a film actor, you have a very technical way how you know how your face has to be positioned on the screen for certain things to be communicated, and film actors are really trained to do that. And a dancer is the opposite. A dancer is actually not so much aware of what they look like. So the moment the screen is there, they become more self-conscious and have to deal with it. So that was sort of the departure point for the work. And we ended up actually working with everything that informed their physical makeup. So we worked with their heroes, their icons, the people they wish to be, the people they will never be able to be because they're different people. Because in us, we all house in us all these different identities, these multiple identities of wishful thinking beings, our mothers, our friends, our film actors that we aspire to. So they all kind of form and inform the way we act. So that became sort of like the topic of that work. And it was very difficult to get movement in that work. But there is a bit of movement too. But it became more about the face, that work.
Ella, I wonder if you can relate to that. Ella was telling me before that she, apart from seeing the film Ella once, you never want to see it again. You're happy to just have it put away. And
once it premieres on Sunday, that will be the last time I see it, I think. I don't know, it's just something about when you're dancing and then when you see yourself dance, the two don't match up. There's this missing thing of what you feel like it should look like and then what it actually does look like. And you think, oh, I thought that movement was way more impressive and I didn't think that looked so good. And then there's all the other critical things that get in your mind of, oh, I'm terrible, I should stop dancing right now. That is just so bad. So I don't want to stop dancing, so I don't want to watch it more than I have to. So yeah, that's my theory on how this is all going to work.
Gideon, I wanted to ask you, I read somewhere that you generally have an aversion to dance on film, but that's a bit of a challenge for you, so you enjoy doing it. Do you want to talk a bit about what you think makes a good dance film? And
yeah, well, I just want to qualify my comment too, because I mean, dance on film is pretty broad, and it can be a documentary, it can be a narrative. What I was referring to were these purely abstract projects of dance being a film, having a film outcome or a screen outcome that is not it's not about, let's say, a dancer doing something, and I don't know why I don't like it, because I guess I don't, because I feel like the relationship I get from live dance is this sort of quite immediate sensorial response, and when it's on screen, my attitude towards it is different. I want to know other things, and so it's kind of like abstract on abstract in itself. Like I don't get much from that. That's pretty vague, isn't it? I recently did a project, a VR project with Sydney Dance Company, and I have to say that actually entering a very similar relationship to dance, which is kind of this sensory relationship, this visceral relationship to it, I felt that platform was actually starting to work really, really well in relation to being a kind of a comparison to live. It's live, and it's well, it's not live, but its relationship is different, because my project, I basically threw the viewer or the user into the middle of a big Sydney dance performance on stage in front of a big audience in a big theatre, and they're whizzing by you and so forth. And I think one of the differences is that one of the things I really like in live dance is being really close to it. I love watching shows in the studio. I love studio rehearsals and studio runs. And once it's on stage, I feel like I'm so distant from it. And the VR experience was that I was back kind of in the studio, or I had that same proximity to dancers, and they're whizzing by me and coming towards me. And the other thing I liked about it was that, and this is different to some of the other VR works that I've seen in the past, was that the protagonists in that film acknowledged my presence. So they'd be like, "What are you doing here?" I mean, literally, the dancers would say, "What are you doing here?" or "Can you get out of the way, please?" And so you become... I noticed that people who were watching it became very aware of their own physical presence, even though they were kind of away from their physical presence. And so then this becomes a kind of a dialogue. There's an inner voice that begins, and the dancers are talking to you. And even though it's not your voice, literally, it kind of feels... It's kind of quite credible that it's you. And they, in fact, encourage you to join them. And a lot of people who've been watching it have joined it. In fact, I'd say the majority have. So that's an exciting area, I think, in filmmaking in relation to dance, because it can really put you in the middle of it.
Celia, you've been working in the virtual reality realm as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the project you've been working on?
Yeah, I actually just did my first VR dance piece last week, and my takeaway was that I think just like Pina in 3D worked because you had this sense that you were on stage with the dancers. But the thing is like 3D actually doesn't work because it's 3D was the next step to VR, so that it's fully experiential, and that dance I really think is going to lend itself quite beautifully to the form, and that I think that theater directors and choreographers will really find advantage in the medium more so than filmmakers maybe, because you're in this fixed point, and so you're creating an experience for your viewer that is much like being on stage, and so you have all the transitions around you, and so I personally, as a filmmaker, love to guide you in ways that are... I want to control the experience more, and so I know that I want to continue film, but I think that in terms of, just a couple of decades ago, we don't have great documentation of dance, and so now we have a way of actually being able to truly experience dance as it is, and I think it's actually going to change sort of the course of dance, and we're able to see the different phases and the transitions and the styles, but VR is definitely going to, and dance are 100% made to be together, and I think it'll be a very easy transition, but the filmmaker in me is other way.
Yeah.
Can I just add something small to that?
Please.
I was collaborating with a filmmaker on this project, as I have collaborated with him on other projects, and I really sensed his frustration. I mean, he loved VR, but I also sensed his frustration that, you know, he really felt at that time you're going to definitely cut out of the wide and go into a mid-shot or into a close-up and bang, and he couldn't do it, and it was driving him absolutely crazy. And he was saying, like, how are we going to do this, 6.5 minute shot where, we really want these things to happen? I said, well, we do it all the time. We do it on stage all the time. It's not a problem. Like, people who work either in theatre or work in live dance, they're in a wide shot all the time, and they're directing the audience's gaze kind of cleverly, either through movement or through sound or through lighting. And so this is constantly happening. I said, we just have to rehearse and do test groups of people sitting in the middle and watch their gaze and rehearse and rehearse. And so you have to, two things, you have to come to terms that it is out of your control and they're not necessarily going to look at what you want them to look at, and B, you can actually manipulate that quite a lot more than you think without the kind of machinations of filmmaking.
Anouk, is Chunky Move working with VR at this stage, or is there any?
No, we just we had enough in our hands to get light and sound and image all talk to each other live in the last show. So that was quite a technical challenge to take on, because everything in that show was interlinked and everything was cued live. So there were 2 performers and 2 people on the technical booth, and the guy who did he did only the video. He said he felt like he was playing a video game because he was moving so fast in cueing all the cameras and changing the cameras and changing the settings of the cameras that was by itself already kind of like a high-tech thing to happen. But no, VR, that sounds like, it's just a matter of manipulating the gaze of the audience, and that's the choreography. Yeah, that sounds fun to work with.
So I've just got a couple more questions, and then I thought I'll put it to the audience for Q&A, so you can start preparing your questions. One of the questions I had was around funding. And Celia, this is probably a good one for you. In Australia, it's incredibly difficult to get funding even for a sort of a standard narrative sort of project in film. I just wonder how you go about funding a dance film. Are there avenues over in the States that are, provide funding specifically for that medium, or is it, what was your experience?
Yes, you can go the grant route, but and that is actually what I plan to do for my next feature, is go after grants. It's very hard being a first-time filmmaker, though, because they really need to see bodies of work. And so I did a Kickstarter campaign. And then from that, that was successful, and then there were other people who, because of that, then wanted to give in larger amounts. And then I also directed a commercial while I was shooting the feature, so that I could take all that money and put it into the film, other ways my work got plagiarized, so I got some cash out of that. So that's how it got made.
Bonus. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What happened?
I can't.
Oh, okay. What about Gideon or Anouk in terms of funding in Australia? Do you have any advice for any budding young filmmakers or dancers in the audience?
That's your...
No.
That's your call.
Yeah, I sit on a few funding rounds. I think it's really tough, and this conversation is kind of either you just talk about how tough it is or how boring this conversation could be, or ways around it. Look, yeah, it's a really tough area. I think it's a tough area for filmmakers. It's a tough area for dance makers, for the stage, and the people who want to do both or in between. It's even arguably tougher. I recently sat on a round on a Sidney Myer. What do you call it? The Sidney Myer fund. No, it's not a fund. You get like a fellowship, and it's kind of interesting because there were a few really interesting filmmakers who really couldn't get the project they were putting forward were artistic projects, and some of them involved dance, some of them didn't. But there's no way the film industry would fund these projects, and there's no way. And what I was interested to see on that around that table was people who just said, well, basically they're filmmakers, so they have to go through the film industry. They have a system all set up, and I was saying, well, no. I mean, this is really work that is not in that traditional sense of film. This is really artwork. This is filmmakers doing different things, and the film industry has no support for that. So it's a very difficult. I don't have an answer for it. It's a very difficult area.
How very disappointing.
I'm interested to know if anyone else has an answer for that.
It was interesting also coming from the States, because after just the trouble of getting the film made, the next thing is then getting it into festivals. And what was interesting was that because I'm an American filmmaker, a lot of international festivals expect to fill the American slots with well-known actors and more commercially viable films. And so an art film coming out of the United States is not really heard of. And so there was a lot of international festivals saying, like, sorry, we keep our 2 slots for films with, you know, Jolie or whoever you want. And so it was a really weird thing to, like, find home. And then also having a film that is a dance film, but not really, and it's a narrative film, but not really. There was dance, specifically dance festivals that told me my film wasn't dance enough, and then there was festivals who told me my film was too experimental. And so it was, I mean, navigating those waters, it was, it's a really wild experience. And actually, MIFF is the first festival to honor my film as a dance film, so out of a whole year of touring. So
usually you just submit it under, is there a specific category for creative films or artistic? No, it's
a narrative feature is what it would be. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think we're probably getting close to Q&A. So just before we finish, I thought if you could just tell us what's next for each of you. If there's something coming up or something you'd like to promote that's happening.
Well, I guess, other than the fact I'm still with the Australian Ballet and we're performing Nijinsky and Compalia, I just started another fundraiser for Oxfam Australia. It's Close the Gap campaign. I'm not sure if you guys know much about it, but Indigenous people can, you know, expect to live considerably shortened lives. So I weave a lot of baskets and jewellery and stuff like this, and all funds go towards that campaign. And you can find out more information on my website, which is just my name, ellahavelka.com. So if you would like to support that, that would be deeply appreciative. Yourself? Well, if you're around Wednesday, my film's playing again. And I'm working on my next film, which is going to hopefully be a 6-hour-long film about a town on a sinking island in the winter.
Wow.
I have a show on at North Melbourne Town Hall, Arts House, August 23rd to 28th, around the corner. It's kind of a play, for want of a better term, two-hander, 2 Jews walk into a theatre. That's what it's called. I'm in it, and I co-wrote it.
I'm off overseas to do work for Schauspiel Frankfurt, which is sort of a project aside of Chunky Move. And then when I return, I work on a new show with actually a visual artist filmmaker called Sun Ying Ho from Singapore, which will open next year in March.
Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you for coming. And definitely go and check out the films in the program, because I think there's 4 dance films, and they're all wonderful.
Thank you.